Good Friday evening to you. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. Welcome to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. We'll talk some Indians in just a little bit. We're going to kick things off with the Browns training camp still on schedule so far to come up here in a couple of weeks. And the Browns will be in Berea trying to get ready for a season of football. Kevin Stefanski's first as the head coach. Let's welcome in Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report, one of our favorite X's and O guys with the Browns. Jake, as always, we appreciate the time. Browns' offensive weapons recently ranked second only to the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL. You see the rankings right here. Kansas City 1, Browns, Cowboys, Bucks with Tom Brady and Gronk, and then the Carolina Panthers. When you look at this, Jake, what's your initial reaction to just how high the Browns are and how good they can potentially be on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think most often you hear the talk about, most teams across the league have a hole somewhere. You can't pay for every position, you can't pay for every player. But this seems like a structure where the Browns have a pretty good group of offensive talent, and they had, many of the same guys last year, but they expanded a little bit with Austin Hooper, and we're going to talk about the offensive line, but. You have 16 games of Kareem Hunt. You know now 2 years deep, Nick Chubb is an elite NFL running back. So that position is beyond solidified. And you look at the wide receiver group, you hopefully get, both of their big names are coming off surgery, but hopefully those guys come in healthy and Odell can be healthy for a full year. And you know what Jarvis and Odell can do when they're healthy. And then you add in Austin Hooper, a premier tight end to this group, along with David Njoku, and then drafting the Mackey Award winner and the college game at the tight end position, and Harrison Bryant just the year prior, and bringing him in. So that group is now really solidified. You're not really hunting around for bargain tight ends. You have three pretty good players, you feel like, at that position. And then you add Rashard Higgins, and then the fourth, fifth receiver could be guys like Damian Ratley, or, guys who have talent or have one skill that's really good that can be productive for the group. So look, there's no way around it. When you look at this skill group, there is no weakness to the group. They have at all three positions. It's really solid. And then, Baker's the question here, right? He had a really good rookie season. His second season was full of, ups and downs and more inconsistent play than we hoped for. But the skill group is there. And I think that we're going to talk about Baker a little bit later in the show, but there's no doubt that the talent is there at every single skill position offensively. It's a matter of, as we saw last year, how well do you put those guys in position to make plays? It's not about always calling plays and scheming things all the time. It's about giving guys opportunities. And I know that Jarvis Landry talked about that in the offseason about instead of using the players, they were trying to use plays last year. And I know that might sound a little silly, but it's like sometimes you have to worry less about beating the defense and worry more about how do I get the guy that I have that's really good the opportunity to prove that he's really good, right? Like, how do I put him in a position to just go make a play? Keep it simple, stupid, right? The KISS method is certainly something that's there, and I think that Stefanski will have a better feel for timing and opportunity, and the system that he runs is certainly a perfect fit for this group.
Well, you mentioned the offensive line. You add Jack Conklin, you add Jedrick Wills. Now, Wills hasn't played left tackle, but everybody associated with him who has looked at him thinks he can make that move. Guys like Bill Callahan. I trust him a little bit more than most because of what he is. How big of an upgrade is that? How much do they fit, being Conklin and Wills, fit what Stefanski likes to do?
Yeah, they like to move, and Jack Conklin's a guy who was among the top graded zone blocking tackles in football last year, and I think that's why he's a perfect fit for this scheme that requires linemen to move laterally quite often, right? It's a wide zone system that involves more running from the offensive linemen than most other schemes. I think they track that as far as next level data in the NFL. They track how far individual players run in any given game, and the Vikings offensive line and the San Francisco offensive line, they're up there. They're moving. They try to find guys who can move well laterally to block, run what's called the rip run course, and you're running down the line trying to seal or push out a defender and your gap responsibility. So they have guys now that they feel that can do that, right? They have Jack Conklin, who's a proven player that can handle that role. You have Jedrick Wills, who's obviously a fantastic athlete, tested as a fantastic athlete. Now, like you said, there's some transition from the right side. He's played his entire career to the left, and there'll probably be some bumps in the road. But he's just a really good football player that it's hard to envision him being any worse than Greg Robinson was. If not, I think he's going to be a better player right away. We'll have to see how that shakes out. There's still, like I said, projection, but just a really skilled player. And then you get Wyatt Teller, who's built for a moving scheme as a guard, right? You know what you have in Batonio, you know what you have in Treader. Wyatt Teller kind of solidifying himself at the right guard position is what they hope to see. I think Wyatt did a nice job in the second half of last year, and the Browns are in plenty of lateral schemes in their system last year. So Pro Football Focus has this group sixth in their 2020 projection, and I think it's easy to see why. Very talented at each position, and the scheme is a perfect fit for what these guys are able to do. They're not sit-down, anchor-down offensive linemen all the time. They are guys who can get out and display athleticism, and we'll see them used quite a bit in the screen game, getting out and running and blocking at the second, third level as well.
Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. So we're talking Browns. Let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield. Now, we had touched on it. Not a great season, year two. How big of an advantage and how big of a difference do you think it will make in Kevin Stefanski's offense with an upgraded offensive line for Baker Mayfield? And did the things that you saw last year, are they correctable? And let's not forget Alex Van Pelt. I know I'm throwing a lot at you there, but now you have a different scheme, you have an improved offensive line, and you have a pretty good quarterback coach coaching him up as opposed to what there was last year.
Yeah, I give the Browns a ton of credit, right? They've put not only a great skill group around him, but now they're putting a great offensive line around him, at least the potential for a great offensive line around him. And that's important. You know, I think that the Browns have failed Baker in terms of structure above him, head coaching turnover, play calling turnover, all of those things that you don't want to see a young quarterback have to deal with in his initial run in the league. The Browns have failed with, but they are doing a good job putting the right group around him from a skill and talent positions around them. Like I said, the offensive line, the skill position players are very good. They're very good football players. And I think they feel like finally they have the right general manager and the right head coach that can provide some stability. Now it stinks that year three, Baker's seen 4 head coaches and 3 different play callers. But the idea here is that this young man now can get some solidification moving forward and can really use the talent around him. He has to, find ways to function in this offense. And I think it's quarterback friendly. And I think anybody who's played in this offense, I read a lot from Sage Rosenfels about going into last year with Minnesota and why he loved this offense from his Gary Kubiak days. And that's where Stefanski really learned this offense, was the Gary Kubiak days. And obviously Kubiak was with Minnesota last year and they worked very closely. It's just super quarterback friendly, right? A lot of play action. They put a lot of burden on the offensive line and running game to be, effective and efficient. And Stefanski ran the football a ton last year. If you look at Kirk Cousins 2018 to 2019, the big difference is the amount of throws he was asked to make. They cut down on the amount of throws, but they increased their efficiency like crazy. So they get their quarterback out and move him. They do a ton of play action, which helps shorter quarterbacks being able to see down the field, helps them improve their sight lines, right? Which is important stuff. You have to be able to get out and see the field. And I think Baker sometimes needs to be able to get out and see the field from outside the pocket. So you'll see a ton of boot action. You'll see a ton of quick throws that involve him moving laterally. He will be asked to sit in and make some throws, but they'll be pretty defined reads. I think that's a good thing. West Coast offense stuff that I think they'll do in their 3-step passing game. It'll be very short pockets. They don't want to let, their tackles beat up field. They don't want Baker bailing. So I think a big point of emphasis, and I've heard Alex Van Pelt talking about changing Baker's pre-snap stance from the shotgun. It'll be sort of how he's able to sit in the pocket and step up and work forward, finding sight lines within the pocket instead of trying to bail out of the pocket laterally. I'm sure they're working with him like crazy on that virtually, and they're going to continue to work with that, because like I said, Minnesota's tackle depth was very short. So when you're envision tackles, keeping things inside a condensed U type of shape pocket, very, very, very much pushing ends upfield instead of allowing them to get beat inside. So they want to open up sight lines for Baker, and they'll do that with different pockets. They'll do that with moving him on play action, allowing him to use his excellent arm strength down the field and accuracy down the field in terms of deep shot throws. He's very good at those, come naturally to him. And then they'll certainly use different scheme things that are fun. If you watch any of the Vikings offense, and I wrote about this at the OBR too, I did a 4-part series on this. ton of different screens. They throw tight end screens, halfback screens. I think Dalvin Cook had over 500 receiving yards last year. They'll get the running backs actively involved in targets pretty often. I think Baker has to get better at checking the football down organically, but they do throw to their running backs often and allow those guys to work in space. So you know how good Kareem Hunt is catching the football. Allow Kareem Hunt to get in one-on-one situations and be the tackler. You know Nick Chubb can do the same thing. So they'll give Baker easier. I think the biggest thing going from last year to this year is they're going to ease the burden on what Baker has to read all the time, put him in a situation that I think will, for the first time in his career, be a scheme that is fit for him. And I think it's so important. You see Lamar, you see Mahomes, you see Wentz, these guys who are playing really well, Deshaun Watson, these guys who are playing really well have found the right play caller and the right system for them. It's unfortunate it might be year 3 that we finally see this for Baker, but it looks like it'll be there for him. So I hope people who are much smarter than me are claiming that he's going to have a bounce back year and that they'll be disappointed if he doesn't. It's justified. It's very justified. I think he's everything is there for him to make a bounce back in year 3, and I'm honestly expecting it.
Kind of interesting. The two things that come to mind as we talk about that, Charlie Casserly, Hall of Fame GM, said they're going to ask him to do less, which will increase his ability to do what he does best, being the Kevin Stefanski offense versus what he did a season ago. And then Greg Cosell from NFL Films said he can't wait to see Baker in this offense. He said he's a guy, and he's not ripping on Kirk Cousins. He says he has much better quarterback instincts and talents, arm talents and the like, than Kirk Cousins, and he thinks this system is a perfect fit for him. So he thinks, just based on what he's seen on film, there's a couple of things mechanically that if they correct, he's due to have a really big year. Do you kind of see where both of those guys are going?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kirk's a great quarterback. He's maximized every God-given ability he's had. Very cerebral football player, but it does not take much to see on film that he doesn't have elite arm talent. He doesn't have the ability to drive the football downfield from various platforms and different sort of on-the-move situations. There's no doubt he's not a great athlete outside the pocket. Baker, while not a great athlete, is a marginal athlete and is good enough when he gets out of the pocket and can create things with his legs. I expect him to run a little bit more this year, too, to create some sliding situations where he can pick up some cheap first downs and keep the chains going. Those sort of things that come as a player can slow down the game a little bit. But yeah, I mean, arm talent, the ability to drive the football, all of those things are Baker's. A little bit more of the natural instincts at the position are certainly in Baker's favor. Now, Kirk is kind of perpetually slept on. I think he's very smart. He has great football awareness. And, those things work in Kirk's favor, and he's able to maximize a lot of his talents. But Baker just has to clean up the little nuances. I think Kirk does a nice job of selling and dedicating play action. He does a great job of keeping things as clean mechanically as he possibly can all the time in repetitive motions. I think Baker has to get there with those things. I think he has to really work his butt off selling play action, learning what the footwork is for his position in this offense. If he does those things, there's not a doubt in my mind. And it doesn't take a trained eye to see that Baker has more natural, talent in his right arm to make some plays happen and make, deep shot plays happen for them too. So certainly I think if he cleans up those little things that we're talking about in terms of mechanics, some of the little things with some decision-making that I think this offense will clean up for him, there's no reason to believe that Baker won't have a nice bounce back year in terms of I could see him going for something along the lines of 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions along that ballpark. And I think that's kind of the big end goal is to push him towards that sort of Matthew Stafford tier of production and sort of getting the interceptions to be cut down too. So I think that there's no reason to believe that it won't happen that way.
And if that happens, Browns would be thrilled, and Baker identifies himself certainly as the franchise quarterback that the Browns think he can be. Let's shift gears just real quickly. Again, we're talking Browns football with Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. The Athletic surveyed NFL agents, and already Andrew Berry listed as one of the top GMs in the NFL, listed third, and that's pretty telling. I mean, keep in mind, the Browns, have had some trouble attracting free agents because it has been a little bit of a mess since they've come back in '99. How big of news is that for Browns fans that already agents see Andrew Berry as a guy they want to deal with, obviously?
Yeah, I don't think it takes to Andrew Berry all too long to figure out that he's an extremely sharp guy. and is very well put together in terms of his approach to football and his ability to communicate interpersonally. Like I just see a guy that is extremely likable, and comes off as very calculated and very understanding, all of those things. And like I said, very cerebral. Obviously, his intelligent background, going to school where he's gone and worked in really intelligent front offices as well, including Cleveland, and certainly Philadelphia. He's a lot and built some really good relationships. So, we don't know ultimately what Andrew Berry becomes here, and it's too many times we've put the card out in front of the horse on these things. But all you can do is look at the decisions that have been made, right? Which they've made great decisions in free agency and structured contracts extremely well. They've done a nice job with one-year deals to bolster their defense and give them some options in the secondary. And I think they've done a really nice job, too, extending Myles Garrett, getting out in front of that, especially before a big season where money could become really weird in the coming years. So I think they did a nice job, especially if the salary cap takes a bump, and locking Myles up. And then they didn't really do anything knee-jerk reaction-wise with David. I think that in Njoku, I think they're certainly going to sit down and talk with him and try to figure out a path that they can make that whole thing work. So all we can do, guys, is judge based on what we've seen. And what we've seen, from my opinion, has been an extremely positive start to his tenure here. And him being third in these rankings, that really ultimately mean nothing, but it does mean that people like him. I think that matters. You have to have people that are willing to talk with you, negotiate with you, and leave conversations feeling like you're an equal part of that conversation, and you can leave a nice impression on people. And I think that's always a positive. So Andrew Berry gets glowing reviews from me, and I think plenty of people smarter than me as well.
Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to take a quick time out. Flip sides of the ball. We're talking Browns defense with Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. When we return, more sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions, or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 614-350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a 4-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. More sports and less Lee. The weekend winners edition continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to flip sides of the ball, start talking some Browns football on the defensive side of the ball. Big news earlier this week. The Browns extended Myles Garrett 5 years, $125 million. And we will talk about Myles Garrett. But before that, let's bring Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report back in. And Jake, let's talk a little bit about the trend in football, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Heavy defensive back usage on defenses, and the Browns seem to be building this defense that way. Speak to that a little bit and some of the things that you see with that trend.
Yeah, it certainly ties into modern football and the use of what's called nickel packages, which are extra defensive backs, taking a linebacker off the field. Traditionally, teams play, whether you play 4 down linemen or 3 linebackers or 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers, you're playing 7 in the box and base defense, what's called base defense. Teams are using more defensive backs now and looking for more of those hybrid players. And by hybrid, I mean guys who can play in the box but also play in coverage. And it's becoming very popular and very understandable as the league trends to more and more and more passing. And it certainly makes sense, and the Browns have attacked it this way. So when you go nickel, you take a linebacker off the field, right? You take one and put a defensive back on the field because you figure that guy covers in space and runs a bit better. And then sometimes teams are even going with dime packages. So, dime just means you're taking 2 linebackers off the field and adding even an extra defensive back. So you would have 4 corners and 2 safeties and then 1 linebacker and then your 4 down linemen or however your defense approaches it. Browns played a lot of what was called 4-2-5 last year, which is kind of taking a linebacker off and adding an extra defensive back, usually a safety, a bigger body type of guy who can play, inside, outside. So they're going to do a lot of that. They're going to do a lot of 5 and 6 defensive back sets. They have a group of safeties they think can rotate in and out and do different things. Carl Joseph, Anderson Dejo, they think are those guys who can play various roles. Obviously, you have Grant Delpit, who at LSU proved he can play near the line of scrimmage and can play in deep coverage, deep half, single high, those types of coverages. Grant can do those things. They like Carl Joseph, a guy who's very physical. He can obviously come up and tackle. He was a high draft pick out of West Virginia. They're trying to let him, he's battled injuries in Oakland, and he comes here trying to prove himself on a 1-year deal. They're hoping they can get a lot out of him. And then Sheldrick Redwine, too, the young safety they took in the 4th round out of Miami last year. They're expecting him to have a role, too, as he played a heavy role in the last half of the season last year. So they have flexible parts. And really what you want to do is, as teams continue to play 3 wide receivers as a base, offensive group, you want to match that with more defensive backs. And that it gives you more options in coverage. And I should mention, too, Kevin Johnson, the nickel corner that they signed out of Buffalo, will obviously have a role as well. But, kind of back to the subject, as you're trying to look at how the NFL goes over the next 10 years or so, the Browns are trying to look at, and they even might micro-condense that down to 5 years. How do we beat Kansas City and how do we beat Baltimore? So, right, the first thing's beating Baltimore because they're in your division. And that's not to skip over teams like Pittsburgh and what Cincinnati could become with Joe Burrow, but you look at the team that's running the division the last 2 years, and it's led by Lamar Jackson. And how do you beat Lamar Jackson? Well, you have to have a nice balance of guys on the football field who can play the run but can also, run after guys like Lamar who are really talented in-space football players. So teams that have had success against Baltimore the last few years, whether that was the Chargers in the 2018 playoffs or last year when Cleveland beat them or into the Titans beating them in the playoffs, it's when they've used a lot of defensive backs. You get out in front of Baltimore, you use guys who can play the run game but can also play secondary coverage effectively and efficiently. So you need more defensive backs that have the ability to play multiple roles and can sort of keep the defense's plan secret. If you have a guy who you bring on the field can only play coverage, that they're probably not going to put him close to the line. You want guys who can do both. So that's what they're trying to do. It makes a ton of sense. And if you look at it on a bigger scale with the AFC, what Patrick Mahomes has become is a guy who can also run, get out of the pocket, make plays. But you have to have people who can cover the likes of Tyreek Hill and some of those deep threats that they have in Kansas City. So it's a challenge, right? It's an ever-changing challenge. And I think you have to have guys who can do different things. And, people are pretty concerned about the linebacker position, which is fair and justifiable because they didn't really address it with a proven talent. But you only need 2. You only need 2, and you might even only need 1 in some situations. So you don't need the 3 linebackers like you're used to saying in old school football when teams are running it a lot. You need 2 linebackers that you feel like you can play. So between Jacob Phillips, between Mac Wilson, Taki, B.J. Goodson, they just have to find 2 of them that they feel they can consistently play and get average play out of, and use the various defensive backs they have in a bunch of different roles and try to fit, kind of try to fit the puzzle piece together. That's Joe Wood's challenge in his first year.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you want the linebackers to be able to run. So the fact that Mac Wilson can cover and the fact that Taki can run kind of fits into the scheme, because you might ask them to potentially cover some of these guys that are running like the tight ends.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at Mark Andrews. We talked about 2 teams we just talked about. Mark Andrews, the Steelers signed Eric Ebron. Talk about Travis Kelce, in Kansas City. They're all over. These tight ends are less. You think about the trim of tight ends, Dave. You think they're less blockers, more receiver now than they ever have been in the past. Well, you need your linebackers to be more coverage and less run game oriented. So you need guys like Jacob Phillips who can really get out in space and run. You need Mac Wilson, who, while a limited athlete in terms of testing numbers, at least has shown nice instincts in the passing game, and you feel like he can be a threat to at least cover an area. B.J. Goodson's a rundown linebacker, and I'm sure they'll use him that way. He wants to get more opportunities to play coverage. We'll see how they use him. And Sione Taki is more of a pass rushing type guy too. So they have some mold players, guys who are certainly more esoteric in nature. They fit a more specific path, but they also, those 2 in Goodson and Taki are hungry to prove they can do more, right? And Jacob Phillips and Mac Wilson, while the prototypes and probably the leaders in the clubhouse to earn those 2 positions, have to prove it. They have to show that they can do it. And linebacker's fascinating to me. They haven't brought in any big time veterans that maybe like a Nigel Bradham that we thought they would. Maybe they still will. It's too early to tell. Sometimes guys sign in the middle of camp, and it's certainly a weird year, so I don't blame any. I mean, there's a lot of big names still on the market, right? A defensive end too. So I don't know. Linebacker is just going to have to be something that is going to be fluid for this year and maybe even moving into next year, because much like teams on offense don't invest much in the running back position. They don't want to tie up too much there. The Browns are making it clear that they're going to have an investment in their defensive line and an investment in their secondary, especially cornerback, and sort of try to piece together and get average play out of the linebackers and hope the front and the back end can prop those guys up. So it's certainly linebacker is one of the more interesting positions on this group. I don't know how it shakes out ultimately, but I'm certainly fascinated by it.
We touched on Myles Garrett signing the big extension. And Andrew Berry kind of said, we're going to sign guys before they get to that option year to lock them up. Do you like the timing of it? And obviously, if Garrett can stay on the field and play the way he's capable of, he can be as dominant a pass rusher as there is.
Without a doubt. I mean, Myles is fantastic. In the past 3 years, has led in pass rush productivity in the NFL, according to metrics like Pro Football Focus. He's fantastic, right? And last year's issue is behind him, and I think he had a one-off and a really great person who had a one-off issue on the biggest stage he could have it on. And it stinks, and I think he wants to remove all of that and move forward, and the Browns didn't let it bother him at all. They didn't blink an eye. I knew they were going to give him this contract, and I thought it made sense all along because how often have the Browns had a dominant player that they've drafted? It's been so long. And think about this, Dave, when Patrick Mahomes is in the same draft, right? He goes 10th to Kansas City, and you don't hear the Browns being dogged on for not taking him first overall. That's how good Myles Garrett is, right? Like, people in the league don't poke fun at the Browns for not taking Pat Mahomes because Myles Garrett is Myles Garrett. He's really good. He's respected across the league. He's phenomenal. He's going to have a big breakout season, which is going to be a 20-sack season. I don't know when it happens. He was trending that direction, trending towards a Defensive Player of the Year nomination last year. If the Browns break out, have a good season, 10-6, 11-5, he's going to be a big part of that. He's going to have 15-plus sacks. He's going to be in the name category for Defensive Player of the Year. It's all there. This is a great signing. There's no other way to put it. It's a guy who loves Cleveland, a guy who has leadership qualities, and he wants to be here, which is huge, and he wants to be a big reason they turn it around. And look, you talk about signing guys early. If Denzel Ward has a breakout season, they're going to look to lock him up for a long time. If Baker has the year we think he might have, contract negotiations will start with Baker because he's had 2 out of 3 really good years. So this front office is going to be aggressive with their young talent. Like you said, they've made it known. They want to lock these guys up that are going to be here for a long time. The cap is sort of malleable in that nature. You can certainly bend it to fit what you need it to fit for the most part. You can't have 32 high-paid players, but if you got young talent, you can lock it up and do so in a way that allows your franchise to keep it for a long time. And I'm excited about it. There's a lot of guys who are on the precipice of having those years in year 3 that could prove to be like the same type of mold Myles is. So if Myles is hitting leadoff here with this whole thing, and we start to see this trend that, as Browns fans, we haven't seen it. That was a big thing, that when they lock Myles up, I'm like, this is kind of how it feels to lock up young talent for a long time. Hopefully we can see more of that trend coming, because if that trend is coming, they're winning games and they're making the playoffs.
And you're right. That kind of leads perfectly into what I'm thinking is, as Browns fans, people haven't had to deal with that because you haven't had the talent that you need to lock up. But it looks like it's coming, which, the only thing I can say for Browns fans is finally.
Yeah, right. I mean, the Chiefs give Pat Mahomes $500 million, and then they lock up Chris Jones for $80 million more. It's like Browns fans are so unaccustomed to being in the position where they hear these signings and they're signing these players, that we've been living in fear for like the past 3 years about how are they going to lock up all these guys. Well, they will. They'll find a way. There's ways the cap can be manipulated so that you're paying out bonus structures and different things at different times that doesn't necessarily hurt or overlap all too much. They're in a great position. They have the most cap in the league right now at this point in the offseason. They're going to pay Myles a lot of money up front and then allow for the back half contracts like Hooper and Conklin to be able to be paid out without being too much stress on the salary cap. You got guys that are running this thing at the top who certainly understand money and structure, and that's what Andrew Berry's good at, and they'll be fine. I have no doubt about it. They'll be fine. So don't freak out when they sign people. That's a good thing. That's what they're supposed to be doing, is locking young guys up for the foreseeable future. If you get 10, 12, 13, 14 really good players, eventually some guys will have to walk. That's the nature of the beast. But that's the position you want to be in, because then you have talent that has proven itself. And when talent is proving itself, you're winning games, you're in the playoffs, and you're maybe hunting to get into a Super Bowl someday.
Jake Burns, we appreciate it. You can read Jake in the Orange and Brown Report. Always a good read. Appreciate the time, Jake. Thanks very much.
Always my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Jake Burns from the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. When we return, we shift gears. Anthony Castrovince from the MLB, a national writer. We'll talk Francisco Lindor and the Indians with Anthony Castrovince. More sports, less lean. The Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Celebrate NatureStone's 30-year anniversary with a free NatureStone floor. During 2020, we will be giving away 30 free floors to 30 very lucky customers to say thank you for making NatureStone the best concrete flooring solution for garages, basements, and more. Call or visit naturestone.com today to register to win, and we'll send you a copy of our new buyer's guide absolutely free. There's no purchase necessary. Winners will be chosen monthly. With over 30 million square feet installed for more than 60,000 customers, it's easy to see why I always say it's not just a floor. Wow, it's NatureStone.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget. Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We're going to shift our focus a little bit, start talking baseball. Indians start a couple of exhibition games that they'll play against the Pirates this weekend, and then regular season underway next weekend. So big things happening with baseball, everything going well down at Progressive Field. And it's time for us to welcome in Anthony Castrovince. He is a national reporter for MLB.com. Anthony, as always, appreciate the time. You wrote an interesting article about Francisco Lindor and kind of the options that the Indians have laid out. Kind of take us through that and just if you're hearing anything at all on the national front as far as the Indians and Francisco Lindor go.
Well, the one option that I didn't put in there was to extend him, which of course is an option, but I think we all live here on planet Earth and acknowledge that it's gotten pretty deep into the process where an extension doesn't look particularly likely. And you look at the history. First of all, there's not a lot of history of a team in this market signing a player to what would probably in all likelihood be one of the top 5 contracts in MLB and building around that. With also some arbitration raises for the likes of Mike Clevenger and Shane Bieber, perhaps trying to extend them. So it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. And we've all acknowledged that the most likely scenario is either he just leaves in free agency outright or they trade him. And then if you trade him, at which juncture do you do that? The best juncture in terms of the return you would have gotten back was last winter. They certainly entertained offers. They found nothing, quite to their liking. And they were ready to go into 2020 with Frankie Lindor as their shortstop and prime member of their lineup. But of course, everything got upended here by the virus, including the baseball season. And now it looks pretty dicey in terms of going into the season and perhaps trying to get a package for him mid-year, which was, of course, an option on the table in the original plan for 2020 was if the season goes south, you can trade Lindor and probably do pretty well. Well, now there's a lot of reason to doubt that they would do very well in that trade market. You can only acquire prospects who are in team 60-player pools for this shortened 60-game season. And on top of that, acquiring teams would be acquiring him for 2 playoff runs, not knowing if they'll even have an October this year. The season could be shut down at any moment. So it's a rough calculation. And also, it seems doubtful that the Indians would totally fall out of it in a matter of 38 days, which is what it would take to move him at this year's trade deadline. So. And then you have complications with just team finances coming out of the shortened season and his rising arbitration price tag. So not that this was ever a uncomplicated conversation prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has made it certainly more complicated.
The thing that keeps entering my mind is we saw the issues that are going to happen between the players union and the owners just on agreeing how they're going to get this started and how they're going to deal with the season and the pandemic. They have to renegotiate a collective bargaining 2021. I think that probably makes Chris Antonetti's job that much more difficult because you need a crystal ball to see, is there going to be some form or fashion where, these $400 million contracts don't exist in that world after 2021?
Yeah, and that might be the case, again, maybe more related to the financial losses due to this pandemic than the actual CBA. And of course, there's always going to be that issue hanging in the air of, would they ever have a salary cap in baseball that would limit those top-end contracts like a Garrett Cole? That's a pretty big conversation. And, given the rancor right now between the two sides and the difficulty of even implementing a revenue sharing structure just for the 60-game season, it doesn't feel particularly likely for 2022 and beyond. I think it's more likely that in some way would be addressed what players can make in the first 6 years of their career, in their arbitration years and before their arbitration years, because that's where we've seen great impact, great performances from young players increasingly. And then, they're expectant of that big payday in free agency. And for a lot of guys, that big payday just hasn't been there in recent years. So it'd be interesting to see how they go about it. But I don't think it really changes the calculus too much for the Indians in terms of the CBA, just because, quite honestly and quite frankly, with a player of this caliber who's super marketable, super gifted as an athlete, he's got everything you could possibly want, and a lot of teams are going to want that. Let's be honest. And barring some drastic injury and loss of time on the field, he's going to fare pretty well to whatever the market is, relative to whatever the market is. And it's hard to imagine a scenario where the Cleveland team, whatever their name, by the way, is the team that can, give him the most lucrative offer. This is a guy who bet on himself very early in his career. After 2016, the Indians made a 9-figure offer to Lindor, and he was a fantastic player already by that point, but he hadn't really blossomed from the power perspective yet. But he bet on himself. He had a big signing bonus as a prominent draft pick. He was the face of New Balance baseball at a very young age, so he was in a good position to bet on himself, and he did. and he's capitalized on it in a big way so far. He's become an MVP type as opposed to just an all-star type. So, so to his credit, he's fulfilled, what he thought of himself and I'm sure eventually he'll fulfill what his free agent value is. I don't see that happening in Cleveland.
Anthony Castrovince is the MLB national reporter. He joins us. Ranked the starting rotations in baseball, and Indians ranked fourth. Nationals were one, Tampa Bay and Reds ahead of the Indians. Indians fourth. What do you like about the Indians rotation? What do you see with it?
Well, it's amazing that you could still objectively rank them that high. Now, granted, I live in Cleveland, so maybe I'm a little more, I see them so often that maybe that bias creeps in. But I think objectively, I don't think anybody would argue that they're a top 10 rotation in MLB. And that's terrific considering that in the last calendar year, they've traded both Trevor Bauer and Corey Kluber. So to still have that depth and to still be churning out quality arms. We saw, Zach Plesac and Aaron Savali, what they contributed to this ball club last year, really unexpectedly, that they were even thrust into that situation with injuries and the illness to Carlos Carrasco. It just shows that, they've got a real pipeline in this system. And they still have pretty good depth. I would say at the AAA level, there's no AAA season this year, but the depth of rotation options is still pretty strong going into 2020. But obviously, it's really fronted by that top end of the rotation. Carrasco coming back healthy in a rotation role as opposed to a bullpen role. And Shane Bieber and Mike Clevenger, the sky's the limit for those two. Those two, in my mind, go into the year as potential Cy Young candidates in the American League. Bieber took another huge step forward in 2019, had the great all-star moment, but a great season to go with it. And Mike Clevenger, he's had some injury trouble, but when he has been on the mound the last couple of years, he's been, by some measures, by some metrics, a top 5 pitcher in MLB. So they got a real good thing going at the top end of that rotation.
How impressed are you from a national perspective? It seems like they do a really good job of developing guys. Plesac comes in and immediately is ready. Aaron Savali comes in, immediately ready. Even a reclamation guy, Jeffrey Rodriguez, was pitching well before he developed arm trouble. Whatever they're doing development-wise with pitching, it seems to be working.
Yeah, and they recognize that, look, we have to be strong in our pipeline, in our system, in our development to survive in a market like this, with a payroll like this. With all the things we were just talking about with Lindor, they can still field a competitive club, perhaps even after moving Lindor, because of that pipeline. And what they've targeted in the draft is college arms predominantly and strike throwers, and kind of figure out the rest later. Because if you have that backbone of experience and that ability to command the strike zone, they can work on you in terms of getting the most out of your velocity, your raw stuff. They can refine that over the course of your professional career, and they've proven that. And the giant leaps forward. Mike Clevenger was a totally low-profile trade acquisition in the Vinny Pastano trade several years back with the Angels, and he comes over here, and then Trevor Bauer had a big influence on this as well in terms of players helping players get better, and that those seeds were sown, and they continue even after Bauer's departure, and they just have a strong developmental system in terms of coaching as well. So it's an important lifeblood for an organization like this.
What do you make of a 60-game season? A guy that you cover it day in and day out. How exciting do you think that is going to be? It's basically pennant race time, and everybody's in it.
Yeah, on some level, I'd love to see this. Obviously, I don't want to see it under these circumstances, but a 60-game season is kind of fun for the reason you just mentioned, and how baseball is always about big surprises, and that's over 162. So you amplify that in a 60-game season. Now, maybe the best teams will have more focus in 60 than they would in 162, and maybe the best teams just win out anyway. But because depth and injuries, injury can change the scope of the season very quickly now. The injury that used to hamper you for 6 weeks in a 162-game season, well, 6 weeks in a 60-game season is 6 out of 9 weeks. That's 2/3 of the season. So it's a fascinating dynamic. And just as a baseball fan, yeah, there's a real curiosity to see how this all plays out, almost kind of a tournament vibe to it. I would have liked to seen an expanded postseason attached to the 60-game schedule, because there is going to be a lot of randomness in 60 games. And you'd like to kind of parlay that randomness with some more October randomness, quite frankly, because to really sort out teams in that October tournament. But obviously they weren't able to work that out with the Players Association. And that's just, one of many things that was a shame in terms of those conversations. But, 60 is better than nothing, which is what we were potentially faced with. And, even navigating 60 and getting 60 both off the ground and to completion is going to be really difficult in the environment that our country is in right now with this virus. But they're going to try like heck. And they've had some success stories here early on. They've had some hurdles, some unforeseen hurdles as well in these couple weeks of summer camp. But, hopefully they get the testing in a good place to really, once they start next week, to keep it going.
Talking with Anthony Castrovince. He is a MLB national reporter for MLB.com, also an author. So let's take a look at this. Has written a book, A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics, and you can buy this Amazon Books, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and wherever books are sold. Baseball Analytics, A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics by Anthony Castrovince. Anthony, let's talk a little bit about analytics. How much fun did you have doing that? And when we were growing up, analytics wasn't really, it was a scout saying, "Boy, the ball comes off his bat, I can just see it." That's not the way they do it anymore.
No, it's not. And yet I think when people do dig into this stuff, they realize how scouty, if I can invent a word, it really is. Because the ball comes off his bat. Well, now we can measure that, he's hitting it hard, but he's hitting into some bad luck. Well, now we can measure that. We can see how much bad luck a guy's hitting into or how much good luck he's hitting into. So I had more fun writing this book than I thought, and probably you might think, because math is not necessarily fun, and a lot of these statistics have a barrier to entry just from the start because they have these weird names and they're easy to make fun of. And WAR, what is it good for? Those hacky jokes. But I think it's important for fans to understand this stuff because, when you really look at batting average and RBIs and wins and saves and all the stats we grew up with, a lot of faults in terms of how they're calculated and what they relay. And I do my best to explain those faults in as conversational a tone as I can. And then I take you through all the relevant metrics. And there's a million different stats out there, but I take you through all the ones that are, relevant, that you're likely to read or just hear about on broadcast, et cetera, or even now see on scoreboards. You see OPS on scoreboards these days. So I try to take the reader through them, again, in a conversational tone, in a fun tone, try to make it more accessible because I feel like, it doesn't do baseball any good to have people talking down to people and making them feel stupid for still citing batting average. It's just that if you haven't taken the time to understand these stats, I can understand why you would just have an aversion to them. But if you see how fun it can be to compare eras, or in a 60-game season like this, no one's going to hit 30 home runs. No one's going to drive in 100 runs. No one's going to win 20 games. Batting average is going to be all over the place because it's such a small sample of games. So I think these advanced metrics will do an even better job of helping you understand, who is performing, who's not, because a lot of them are relative to the league average. So they're just comparing you against your peers in this particular moment. And we're going to be in a moment in a 60-game season that has never happened before in baseball. So you're going to need that fair apples to apples comparison.
What was the most fun in doing that? And you mentioned you weren't really a stat geek or a math guy. What was the most fun with doing it? Again, the book by Anthony Castrovince is A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics. You can get it at Amazon Books, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and wherever books are sold. A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics. What was the most fun that you had in doing that?
Well, I've been covering Major League Baseball for 16 years, and I've had to learn these stats as I've progressed as a writer, and as they have progressed in terms of just being a part of the conversation. But for me, what was fun was really learning the history behind some of them. I frankly did not know the history behind some of them until I really dug into it for the purpose of this book and to explain where they came from and why they were derived the way they were. And it's also just fun just coming up with trivia. There's a lot of trivia in the book. There's a lot of attempts to get people to see things a different way, perhaps see players from many decades ago in a different way. You won't see Gene Tennis the same way after reading this book as you did previously. You'll have a greater appreciation for him. There's a lot of players like that over the course of reading it that you'll gain an appreciation for what they were good at and when they were good at it. And as I said, I think that's the real fun of advanced analytics. It's a better way to compare eras. It's hard to compare Babe Ruth to Francisco Lindor. They played in two very different times, but when you see what they did relative to their peers in their time, that's where you can start to make comparisons.
Anthony Castrovince, MLB.com, national reporter. We appreciate the time as always. Thanks very much. Best of luck with the book. Hopefully we check back in with you and baseball is running smoothly here in 2020. But thanks so much for the time.
I appreciate it, Dave. And yeah, let's hope 60 is, like I said, 60 is better than 0. That's for sure.
We appreciate it very much. Anthony Castrovince, the national reporter for MLB.com. He's a national baseball reporter. We're going to step aside, take one more quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll take a look at some of the most interesting things this week from social media. More sports, Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a 4-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
Well, hello, everyone. Let me tell you a little bit about Browns Football Insider. For only $3.99 a month, you can get text sent right to your phone each day from me, Dan Lobby, Scott Pasco, and Ellis Williams. In addition to that, you'll receive a Football Insider newsletter every day with special things from us, things that you won't see anywhere else on the site. You'll get breaking news, analysis, features, film breakdown, and things like that. Texting us directly gives you a great chance to cut through the clutter of Facebook, Twitter, other social media, and avoid the trolls. Also, it's the only way to get your questions on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. So why should you sign up? Try a 14-day free trial. You can cancel at any time. All it takes is one text, but you won't want to cancel. We have hundreds of subscribers join us over the last year. They love it and have stayed with us. We're seeing the Football Insider community grow every week. And it's only $3.99 a month, which is less than 14 cents a day. What I like most about Football Insider is the opportunity to connect with you one-on-one and really communicate with you. So how can you become a Football Insider? You can click on cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Or easier yet, text me at 216-208-3965. Again, that's 216-208-3965.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant, whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at smiley1.com.
Welcome back to More Sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Almost out of time this week, but before we go, sports and social media just seem to go hand in hand. Each week, we take a look at some of the fun and unique things that hit social media. This week, Madden rankings, Myles Garrett extension, and a Dodgers clubby all make it socially distant. Madden rankings came out and social media has always noticed. Nick Chubb of the Browns was ranked as the 3rd best running back overall, but he was the hardest to tackle in that specific ranking, ahead of Josh Jacobs of the Raiders, Derrick Henry of the Titans. Kareem Hunt of the Browns was ranked 7th in the hardest to tackle category. Highest rated quarterback, no surprise, it's Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs with a 99 rating. That's the highest you can get, part of the elite 99 club. Mahomes gets the swag for being part of the best from his Cleveland Heights native and teammate on the Chiefs, Travis Kelce. Not all quarterbacks were thrilled with their rankings. Deshaun Watson of the Texans feels definitely underrated at 86. There's the tweet. The Browns locked up Myles Garrett to a 5-year, $125 million extension. Social media focused on the incident with Mason Rudolph in some unique ways. NFL Memes did the math for us and figures out that Garrett can hit Rudolph with his helmet 2,739 more times at the rate he was fined before he runs out of money now. Pittsburgh sports talker Andrew Filipponi weighs in that it makes him sick that Garrett was rewarded with the extension. Wonder what his takes were on Hines Ward cheap shot blocks for his career, or James Harrison hit on Colt McCoy. Never mind, we all know the answer to that. Finally, the Dodgers have one of the most talented rosters in all of baseball. They're deep and loaded. Take a look at Mookie Betts, acquired in the offseason with a shot to left, robbed by Francisco Herrera, ends up as a double play. They call Herrera Chico. He's been a star in the Dodgers inter-squad games. Chico is not on LA's roster. In fact, he's the Dodgers clubhouse attendant. Not even a player. He's been filling in and starring to keep players fresh. That's just how good those Dodgers can be. Herrera hadn't played in an organized game in 10 years, but the Dodgers clubby can play some outfield, and you saw the double play there. We're all out of time on this edition of More Sports and Les Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Want to remind you, Les will be back in the chair Monday from 6 to 7. We'll see you back here next weekend. Have a great week, everybody, and stay safe.